Hey everyone, welcome back to our case study with my client Athena. So, if you have been following along in this series so far, this is part number 3. So, there are 2 other parts if this is the first one that you're seeing. What we are doing for this month really is we are breaking down a case study of one of my clients who has successfully lost 23 now of her 25-pound goal weight loss. So when we first started this particular case study, she was down about 20 out of the 25 pounds. Since we recorded the video, she is now only about 2.5 or so pounds away from her goal. So whatever that number is, I cannot do math on the spot, obviously. So in part 1 of this series, we discussed how the cut phase actually works, how to lose fat without damaging your metabolism, and how to make sure that you preserve your precious muscle mass, which is the basis for your metabolism. So in part 1 of the series, we discussed how we were doing 3 weeks of a calorie deficit and 1 week of maintenance. And I went into a little bit more detail about what those mean and why we are doing those maintenance weeks in between. So that total amount of time has added up to about 24 weeks when we recorded the session that you're about to see right now. And before that, we had actually done about 9 weeks of priming, which brought it to a total of 33 weeks that we have been working on this seemingly small amount of weight loss. But in part 2 of the series, we discussed body composition scans and how we are actually tracking Athena's weight loss to make sure that the weight that she is losing is as close to 100% body fat as possible, because what we wanted to do was actually lower her body fat percentage during this time, not just see a lower number on the scale. And because of that, as we heard from Athena, she is actually seeing herself in a whole new light because she is at a weight that she previously thought was higher than necessary for her. And she feels like it's actually very lean and trim for her right now. So we are cheering you on, Athena, as you get down to the last couple of pounds. As I mentioned in previous videos, her total goal was about 25 pounds. At the time of the recording, she was down about 20 of that. She was only 5 pounds away. And as of right now, I think this week her weigh-in put her at only about 2.5 pounds or so away from her goal of 25 pounds, which she should slide right into in the week of June, which is the wedding where she was getting ready for it this entire time. Anyways, so today we are going to touch on something that you may have heard me say to Athena in the past couple of videos, and that is about her consistency level. So one of the reasons why I really want to stop and break this down right now is because when I say consistency level, when I'm working with my clients, whether it's one-on-one clients or my group coaching clients, we discuss the thing of levels, and I really mean levels. So I give a actual number to what the levels are. So with my clients, they know that at bare minimum, we're working towards a level 1, which is about 60% consistency, up to a level 4 to 5, which is 80% consistency or more. So usually that's what we're trying to do, is first get them into the 60% consistency range, move them up to 80%. And when we're around there, that's when we can start talking about making these shifts between phases and actually getting results from them. Because personally, I have seen that when someone is well below that 60% consistency mark, it doesn't matter if they're switching a lot of the phases, they're not necessarily going to get the results from that phase because they're not executing the behaviors for the period of time that they need to. So for instance, if you are wondering like what that looks like, typically someone that is at 60% consistency, that is maybe if there's a specific thing that you're supposed to be doing 7 days a week, you're only doing it about 4 days a week. If there's something that you're supposed to be doing like 30 days, like something you're doing every day all month, but you're only doing it maybe like 15 to 18 days of the month, that's going to be about 60%. So, I mean, take 50% and just add a little bit to that versus the 80% territory. So that is one of the things that I'm constantly grading my clients on before we move to the next level. So in this clip today, you will hear Athena talk about how basically we worked our way through these levels, and it just took her as long as it took. But that is one of the things that I noticed, that people tend to resist the most in this journey, because we are constantly scared that we're making a wrong move. So for instance, this could show up when somebody's doing a metabolism reset and they start slowly increasing their calories, but maybe the scale starts jumping around and they fear that they're doing something wrong. So instead of staying consistent with those increases, or at least eating at the new increase, even if it was only a 50-calorie increase, they get scared, run and lower their calories again, and then start over another time, or go off on a 2-year tangent and come back and start over. And the same thing when it comes to moving into some of these phases where like your protein is really important. I see a lot of people that will maybe do it for a little while, but because they don't see this like rapid thing happen with the scale or whatever it is that they're looking for, they're like, oh, I tried eating more protein, but it didn't work for me, versus getting consistent at that 60%, 70%, 80%, 90% or more consistency level, so that you can actually see results. So many people are very concerned about, and what change do I make next? And what change do I make next? And what do I do now? And wanting to change things up, that they skew their consistency levels. And one of the things that has been the highlight of Athena's journey for me is that as her coach, I have not had to change anything that I've told her from day one back in November when we first started this journey. And for reference, it is now May of 2022. So when we first had our discussion and I ran her numbers in November of 2021, the things that I told her to focus on is all that she's had to focus on the entire time. And she has not plateaued at all, because the plateau buster was already in there with those maintenance weeks. So she was able to stay consistent at the calorie level, at the protein level, on her both her deficit weeks and her maintenance weeks this entire time. Most people think that they're going to need the next step, and I do plan out what those steps are, but I don't necessarily throw them all at my clients at once. I get them to focus on the thing that is most important and to get consistent with that, and then if we need changes, we do. So one of the contracts that I have with my clients is just that, is that if you are willing to be 100% responsible for your behaviors, I am willing to be 100% responsible for the results. And that means that if I look and someone's consistency level is exactly where it needs to be and they're not seeing changes, that's when I, as the coach, go to work in tweaking the numbers and saying, okay, now let's try this, let's try this, let's try that. That is one of the things that makes people much more successful than when they are so worried about the next step that they're not staying consistent in the one that they're in. So that little blurb is just to kind of get you ready for what we're talking about today. I am going to get out of the way a little bit and let you guys watch this clip with Athena now. Yeah, so those are the biggest things that, like I say, that I've noticed in your journey, is your level of consistency is beyond what it's ever been. And I want to know how much you feel that that plays a role into where you are right now, because like, so a lot of people are, you know, they're going to hear like 10 years and all these things, right? And one of the things that I tell people a lot is when we hear the stories of somebody who's been, you know, doing EM2WL for like years and years and years, it's kind of like, it scares people because they're like, well, it's going to take me 10 years, you know? And I feel like so much of that, like, yes, we definitely have patience with this process because it's not overnight. There's nothing about it that's going to happen overnight. But a big part of it is the shifts that I feel that you've had even in the past couple of years of really getting consistent. Like that has sped a lot of things up for you.
Yes.
Because of the fact that when it was time to eat, you ate, you committed to the eating. When it was above and beyond the amount of calories that you wanted, you weren't able to work out and do the things. So like every step of the things that were typically contradictory, and I feel like those are the places where we get caught up and make our journey take longer, is because we resist those. If we have to stop doing cardio for a while, we resist it and we like sneak it in every now and again. So we never get the consistency. If we need to stop working out and heal from an injury, we don't really. If we need to increase our calories, we increase them a little bit, but not all the way. If we need to eat a certain amount of protein, like we, you know, get it a couple of days and then it kind of fades off. So Like, can you tell me which parts of the process you feel like you're happy you took your time with, and which parts do you feel like you could have like possibly sped up by committing and like being the level of consistent that you are right now?
Let me see. I mean, you know, that's a tough one. I think the consistency, like, you know, like the logging of food for me, consistent logging is something that, you know, had I been a little bit more, I mean, and that and the protein was so like in the early part of when I started working with
Right.
you, really took me a long time to kind of get down. So I think, you know, the consistency all around with everything, I think when you combine it all, that is, you know, that's going to get you the results that you want. But, you know, did I resist stuff here and there? Absolutely. I mean, I think everybody does because, like you said, and is it going to take everybody 10 years? No, but it took me 10 years. And that doesn't mean it's going to take the next person 10 years. It was just a lot of trial and error and trying to figure it out and just really kind of just, you know, immerse yourself in it and embrace it and realize that, you know, this is not a quick fix. This is like a lifestyle change, really, that you just totally need to immerse yourself in to make work. You know, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did absolutely, because that's the thing is like being able for someone to understand, like when we say it's a lifestyle, it truly is a lifestyle, but the way that you've been able to incorporate these things along the way, like some of it was just going to take as long as it took. Some of the things, like some of the pieces to the puzzle probably could have been sped up to an extent.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like maybe, I don't know, maybe taking the time out to heal the injury a longer time ago, like could have helped it. Or with the food, like some of the other mini cuts would have been different if the calories were already there, or but every single part of it, like I said, I feel like it all is like everything was always building on each other. So when we were in a period of getting consistent with the workouts, it's not like nothing was happening. You were getting consistent with the workouts. So you got consistent with the workouts, and then you had to get consistent with the food, and then you had to get consistent with the protein. So you know what I mean? Like every single piece of that came together. And I think sometimes we're so focused on not being able to accomplish the entire picture that we slow down the entire picture because we're trying to do everything at once. And you know, I know you've been through like Crush the Diet and all those things. So a big part of that learning up front was those baby steps. And I feel like your journey is the epitome of those baby steps. So when
yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, like I had to spend time, like, you know, okay, we're going to spend the next, you know, 6 weeks. You got to do all your workouts. Okay. Make that like a habit. And then after that gets established, then it's like, okay, now you got to get the protein in, or now you got to, you know, maybe get more steps. But you can't, I mean, for myself, I find that if you try to do all of that at once, it becomes really overwhelming.
Yeah.
So if you just focus on one thing and get it down really well, then you add something else, and then you add something else. And then in the end, they all kind of just come together, you know?
Yeah. And that's literally how it has become a lifestyle, because right now with the cut, it's not like your mind is overly focused on all of the little things, because so many of the little things are now habits to you. So it's only focused on the main thing. So like when it's time to cut, it's like, you know, to zero in on your protein, like, okay, let me map this out. And once that's kind of a habit, like you know where your wiggle room is during your maintenance weeks. Cause it's like, okay, because I pretty much eat like this during my weeks that I'm cutting, I know that I can add in this on these weeks. Whereas when we're trying to do all of those things, that's the reason why a lot of people will see the yo-yo, the up and down of like, okay, I lost all the weight and then I went completely back to normal, whatever normal was. Like you're nowhere near who you were 10 years ago. You slowly changed and evolved into this person who can eat the amount of protein that you eat, hit the cut calories that you're hitting, weigh consistently, work out consistently, and do all those things because of those baby steps, because of that constant habit stacking. You slowly became an entirely different person than you were 10 years ago. Okay, so I'm gonna stop it right there because where she's getting ready to go next is a whole nother subject. But I really wanted to emphasize this week about consistency. Like I said, with Athena, we have not had to change anything over the 6 months that we've been working towards this goal, and she's been able to continue getting results. With typical diets, you're constantly like shifting things because your body adapts and you have to go to the next thing, or because you're getting panicked because things aren't happening fast enough and you switch something up. The importance of the consistency, especially if you're doing what we discussed in part 2 with those scans, is the biggest part of all. Because what I tend to see, whether it's someone who is measuring that using tape measures, measuring based on the scale, or getting scans or looking at pictures, is that they don't know what they're measuring. They don't know how to decipher what worked and what didn't, because the amount of steps that they took in between scan 1 and scan 2, or weigh in 1 and weigh in 72, or these pictures and then pictures 4 weeks from now. If you've changed up so many things in the process, you don't really know what worked and what didn't. So when you are measuring progress, a big part of being able to measure progress is to be able to measure, I executed this behavior for this amount of time and I got this result, so that if you want to double down on that result, you know that, okay, I can just keep doing more of that. I don't really have to change anything else. If you are not satisfied with that result, then you know that you can add something else in and then test that. But when typical diets that have you change so many things, that have you follow a specific workout plan and follow a very strict like eating plan and all of those things, you don't really know what it is that's causing it. Is it because you just lowered the calories? Is it because you reduced carbs and lost some water weight? Is it because it's a higher protein amount? Is it just because the workouts that you're doing are give you an extra calorie deficit? You don't know. So having consistency in your tracking is essential in understanding and deciphering your results. Otherwise, what are you really tracking? You don't know. So I really wanted to dedicate one episode just to that, because like I said, that is the piece of the puzzle that most people tend to dismiss or wait too long to execute on. So one of the things that you heard me mention in Athena's story is that a lot of times people will hear about someone's EM2WL journey and like, but why did it take them so long? And many times, one of the things that causes us to take longer than necessary is that inability to get consistent soon enough, because we're waiting for kind of our old school, that diet mentality of, okay, I did this thing, now all the weight should fly off, and we're waiting for that overnight result. We're not giving results enough time to compound. And what's happening in the meantime, when results are compounding, when things are moving at what we consider to be a slower pace because of dieting, it's actually causing us to establish a habit. And when you establish the habit, that becomes who you are, versus this thing that is taking all of your willpower and brain power and everything to execute on. It becomes a part of you, so that not only do you get the results, but you're able to maintain them. 9 times out of 10, when you're doing something very extreme, you have no problem getting the weight off, but it's about keeping it off, which gives us, most of us, the problems that we're having is that we get it off, but we don't keep it off. And then we have to try something more and more extreme the next time. Whereas if we had just stayed consistent with typically 1 to 3 critical behaviors, we would see the results that we want. So hopefully this gave you guys a little bit of insight into that when you are deciding on the steps that you're going to execute, if you can narrow it down to just the top 2 to 3 things that are going to be the biggest bang for the buck, the biggest needle movers in the journey, typically that's going to be the calorie level for the phase that you're in, the protein amount for the phase that you're in, because that does shift and change, and it also changes with your weight and a whole bunch of other things. But getting your protein levels to where it needs to be, hitting the right calorie goal for the specific phase that you're in, and being consistent with the workouts that match the phase that you're in are typically going to be your top three. As far as food, getting in like enough fiber and stuff like that also counts, but it is a big difference if you get really consistent on those three first before you start looking around for other things to execute, and then use that percentage range of, am I at 60%? Am I at 70%? Am I at 80%? So am I hitting 4 out of 7 days of the week? Am I hitting 5 out of 7 days of the week? Am I hitting 6 out of 7 days of the week? And really start analyzing your behaviors as much or more than you analyze the results. When you get really good at analyzing your behaviors and really good at holding those behaviors to a standard of a percent consistency level, you will see results. And whenever you don't see results, you will have a solid starting place to continue to move from, versus feeling like you're starting from scratch every single time. So hopefully that really gave you guys a little bit more insight into what I feel has been hands down the needle mover in Athena's journey. Her consistency level has been amazing over the past 2 years, specifically in getting her calories up to where they needed to be while she was injured, recovering from injury and rebuilding lost muscle mass, and then being able to consistently stay at the protein level that she needed to once we moved into a cut phase, get her calorie levels to where they needed to be during her cut weeks, and moving them immediately to the place that they need to be during her maintenance weeks. So all of these things are playing in, and she has been super consistent at that for 6 months and counting. Bless her heart, but she is about to get a break very soon as she prepares for her brother's wedding. So thank you guys for sticking with me in this series. I will be back for part 4 of the series next week, where we get into a little bit more detail into a different part of Athena's journey. But again, I hope you guys are enjoying this. Give me some feedback and let me know if this is useful to you as you navigate your way through either a possible cut phase, or maybe you're resetting your metabolism now in hopes of one day going back into this cut phase process. And hopefully this is giving you some insight as to what that can look like for you. So thank you guys for joining, and I will see you again next week.